around the world, a birthday celebration for President Richard Nixon.
A delegation led by Richard Nixon's grandson is in China today. That group is retracing the late president's visit to China back in 1972.
40 years ago, Nixon eased Cold War tensions between the United States and China during a diplomatic trip. His visit ended years of silence between the two nuclear powers and paved the way for a better relationship.
Christopher Nixon Cox is retracing his grandfather's historic 1972 trip. Nixon is often credited with breaking the deadlock between Washington and Beijing during the Cold War.
Of the government of the People's Republic of China.
Great Hall of the People. President Nixon called it the week that changed the world. His 1972 visit to China that ended 25 years of isolation between the two countries. 41 years later, and another Nixon is back.
Great to see you.
Christopher Nixon Cox, the grandson of the 37th president, has been retracing the steps of that historic visit, marking the centennial of President Nixon's birth.
What an incredible change from 40 years ago. If you look at some of the personal freedoms, not political freedoms necessarily, but personal freedoms that people have now, as you said, how people dress, how people can interact with each other. It's been big changes. And I think that as a new generation of Chinese citizens grow up, certainly with the use of the internet and things like that, I think that you will start to see some other changes and maybe some political changes.
The 34-year-old investment banker was in China with his wife, billionaire supermarket heiress Andrea Katsamadis, and an entourage that included officials who'd accompanied his grandfather to China.
Our very first trip, of course, everyone was in a gray mouse suit. There were no vehicles except a few Soviet-built cars for government officials. Once in a while, I see someone in a blue mouse suit and say, wow, who is he? He must be important. And the stark contrast between then and now, the colors, no one smiled.
President and First Lady.
The 1972 trip is credited with opening China to the world, and it was also an important Cold War play, driving a deeper wedge between China and the Soviet Union. And the term Nixon going to China has become a metaphor for an unexpected action by a politician.
We should never keep a billion of the world's most able and hardworking people in isolation. And so I think that he would have expected to see the Chinese people to be so prosperous and industrious and to build such a magnificent and marvelous economic system.
The anniversary trip was designed to stress the positives of both the Nixon administration and the Chinese Communist Party. China is a much more open and complicated place than it was 41 years ago. There are a whole new set of challenges for today's policymakers. And today's top officials, now regular visitors, are grappling with a host of thorny issues, from cyber spying to North Korea. China's now the world's second largest economy and an economic and political competitor. The relationship can be tense and difficult.
I think we have digested quite a lot in the past 41 years, and yet the problems haven't become any easier. Issues of cybersecurity, regional and territorial disagreements between China and her neighbors, and certainly terrorism. All of these are quite daunting.
But that wasn't going to stop a good banquet hosted by China's top foreign affairs official and designed to mirror a banquet thrown
The Chinese people
for President Nixon.
Indicating the trust passed on to us by those leaders as we together seek to broaden and deepen our cooperation in the generations to come. my grandfather visited Hangzhou in 1972. He brought the gift of saplings of American redwood trees. They symbolize strength and beauty. The smallest redwood saplings can grow into the largest of all Earth's trees, and in the proper conditions, they can live for thousands of years. May this tree grow tall and great and strong and have a long life, like the friendship of our two great peoples.
Sat down and they talked about the big issues. Where do they see the world going? Where do they see their place in the world? What kind of a relationship do they want? Where do they see other countries as countries that were contributing to the betterment of the world, or countries which were not? So they were able to then build a very strong strategic, fundamental, a foundation that normally countries don't get to build.
What has America done? We've done, in a little way, what you have done so well from China to America, and that's that we've gifted you our children. And I think on a baby step front, that's something that we can continue to do, and I'd love to see you smart people continue to think about that. How can we create opportunities for our children to continue to exchange, and so that moms and dads feel not only comfortable but are encouraging their children to share on both sides, because as they do that, then the politicians are going to want to come and exchange because the kids are already here. Our kids are studying here and your children are studying in the United States, and I think that's a great way to forge those relationships.
Today, we're extremely pleased to welcome all of you here in the Jinjiang Grand Hall, because it is in this very place that the China-U.S. issued the first joint communique.
所以我就在想，老一代建立起来的打开的中美关系大门，我们作为晚辈来说，应该把这种友好关系传承下去。
So in the spirit of the friendship of the original trip and of this great trip and in future exchanges, may I ask you to join me in toasting the week that indeed changed the world.